In the flickering shadows of an abandoned dojo beneath the city's heart, a golden retriever named Ash performs a kata with the precision of a master. Abandoned on a highway and left for dead, Ash was found by Jonah, a disgraced martial arts sensei living on the fringes. Together, they have forged an impossible bond, transforming Ash's natural instincts into the disciplined strikes of karate. But this isn't about violence, it's about the empty hand. Ash's goal is to protect the defenseless, yet he struggles with the deep-seated fear that he is still just a bad dog who was thrown away. When a wave of crime threatens their bridge-dwelling community, Ash must step out of the shadows. He will become the hero the city never expected, a guardian who uses the way of the warrior to save lives, proving that even the discarded can find a noble purpose. Ash thought the stop meant a walk, a brief reprieve from the humming vibration of the floorboards. The car rolled to the dusty shoulder of a long, empty road where the horizon shimmered in the midday heat. When the door opened, he jumped out, tail wagging in rhythmic thumps against his legs, his nose already busy decoding the scents of dry grass and sun-baked asphalt. His owner reached down, but he did not offer a scratch behind the ears. Instead, he unbuckled the collar. He didn't meet Ash's eyes. There was no anger in the gesture, no sudden outburst of cruelty. There was only a terrifying, hollow distance. The door shut with a finality that echoed across the plains. The engine turned over, and the car pulled away, shrinking into a silver speck until the sound itself abandoned the air. Ash stood perfectly still, waiting for the familiar whistle or the call of his name that never came. He waited because waiting was the only language love had ever taught him. Minutes stretched into hours. The sky bruised into deep purples and oranges, and still he stayed. Surely they would return for him. They always had before. Night arrived quietly, bringing a biting cold that crept into his paws. Hunger began to twist inside his stomach like a living thing. Rain began to fall, soaking his golden fur. Ash curled beside the gravel, wondering what mistake had earned this silence. Had he loved too loudly? Followed too closely? Trusted too completely? Ash walked until his paws ached and the paved road blurred into narrow streets filled with the overwhelming, jagged scents of the city. Houses glowed warmly at dusk, venting the smells of roasted meat and safety through cracked windows. He approached these boundaries carefully, his tail held low but hopeful, offering the only currency he had, his presence. But the world had changed its rules. Doors slammed before he reached the porch. Voices hardened into jagged edges. Hands waved him away as if he were a ghost or a plague. Some people didn't even slow their steps, they simply looked through him. The local shelters were far worse. Cages overflowed with barking, shaking bodies that smelled of panic and bleach. Signs on the walls promised compassion, but the faces of the workers admitted only exhaustion. A volunteer knelt once, touching Ash's head gently before shaking hers with a heavy sigh. There was no room for a stray of his size. Ash learned to retreat before the rejection finished forming in a human's eyes. It hurt less that way. At night, a strange warmth began to pulse beneath his ribs. When other dogs lunged or snarled at him over scraps, the world seemed to stretch thin, their movements sharpening into a slow-motion clarity. Ash could dodge without thinking, leap farther than any instinct allowed. Strength was answering his fear like a secret, growing language. Still, he felt the weight of the void. Power did not open doors. It did not soften voices. The miracle did not announce itself with a flash of light or a chorus of sound. It happened in the mundane chaos of a Tuesday afternoon. A delivery truck skidded on rain-slick pavement, its heavy tires screaming as it veered sharply toward a woman crossing the street. Shouts rose from the sidewalk. Bodies froze in the grip of anticipated horror. Fear thickened the air until it was almost unbreathable. Ash ran. Something inside his chest unlocked, quiet and absolute. Time did not stop, but it thinned, as if the entire world had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Ash felt every vibration beneath his paws, every microscopic shift of weight in the truck's chassis. His body moved entirely before his conscious thought could intervene. He didn't just bark, he acted. He struck the front tire with his shoulder, bracing his legs with a strength that felt ancient. Metal groaned under the pressure. The truck lurched sideways, its momentum diverted by an invisible force, crashing into a concrete barrier instead of soft flesh. Then, the sound returned in a deafening rush. Chaos resumed. The woman collapsed, shaken but alive. People rushed toward her, their voices a blur of static. Ash slid across the wet pavement, bracing for a pain that never fully arrived. His body absorbed the impact as though it were designed for it. He stood up, trembling, staring at his own paws in total disbelief. No one noticed the dog. They were too busy with the wreckage. Jonah lived in the places where people forgot to look. The underside of the bridge gave him shelter from the rain and the crushing indifference of the city above. Once, Jonah had belonged somewhere, had a name that people said with affection. But loss had taken that life away, piece by piece, until silence became his only permanent address. He noticed Ash immediately. He saw the thin frame, the careful, deliberate steps, and the eyes that watched the world with a haunting intelligence. "You can stay here," Jonah said, tearing his meager sandwich in half and placing it on the cold ground. "I won't chase you away." Ash hesitated. Humans were unpredictable creatures, and kindness was often the most dangerous trap of all. But Jonah didn't reach out to grab him. He simply waited. Ash ate. They shared the cramped space before they ever shared trust. Jonah talked sometimes, his voice a low rumble that drifted like smoke. He told stories of jobs lost, people gone, and mistakes made too loudly to ever be silenced. Ash listened, resting his heavy head on his paws, comforted by the mere fact of another heartbeat nearby. Jonah began to notice the things others missed. He saw how Ash could leap impossible distances to catch a falling scrap. He saw how falling debris seemed to curve away from the dog. "How do you do that?" Jonah asked once. He wasn't accusing or afraid, he was just curious. Ash didn't answer, but the tension in his shoulders eased. Healing came to them slowly, disguised as the boring comfort of routine. Jonah taught Ash when to rest and when to move, showing him how to stay calm when the urban chaos pressed too close to their sanctuary. In return, Ash taught Jonah how to feel responsibility again. It was a terrifying thing to have something living to care for instead of just nursing old regrets that fed on the dark. "Fear lies to you," Jonah said often, his eyes watching the rhythmic flow of traffic on the tiers above them. "It tells you what you can't do, but it never has the courage to tell you what you can." Ash did not understand the specific words, but he understood the vibration of the tone. The calm in Jonah's voice steadied the wild warmth that lived inside Ash's ribs. When a sudden siren or a loud bang made fear surge, Jonah would breathe deeply and slowly. Ash learned to follow that rhythm. He discovered that his power answered to control, not to panic. They practiced together without ever calling it practice. They spent hours standing still when every instinct screamed at them to flee. They practiced balancing on shaking legs. They practiced choosing restraint over a violent reaction. Ash failed often. Sometimes the fear would freeze him into a statue of golden fur. But Jonah never shouted. He never showed disappointment. He simply waited in the silence until Ash was ready to try again. Trust grew in those long, quiet pauses between their heartbeats. Training did not feel like a heroic montage. It felt like a repetitive, exhausting struggle against the limits of biology. Stand. Fall. Rise. Breathe. One morning, Jonah found an old, tattered white cloth and wrapped it around Ash's torso, knotting it gently like a makeshift vest. "Uniforms remind us who we are trying to become," Jonah whispered. Ash did not resist the garment. He felt the weight of it as a promise. At first, Ash could only stand upright on his hind legs for a few seconds. His muscles burned with a lactic fire, and his balance wavered like a reed in the wind. He fell hard again and again, the concrete unforgiving against his ribs. Each time, Jonah was there. No commands were barked. No frustration was shown. There was only the steady presence of a friend. When Ash's fear spiked, the world would begin to slow down, tempting him to rely on the rush of adrenaline. Jonah would shake his head, sensing the shift. Power without discipline only destroys itself, he warned. You don't fight the fear, Ash. You walk through the center of it. Ash learned the art of the threshold. He learned when to let the warmth rise into his limbs and when to let it rest in his heart. He began to sense danger before it even turned the corner. His shadow seemed to grow heavier when he stood firm, stretching farther than the light should allow. Still, a deep doubt lingered. What if he failed when it truly mattered? Jonah met his gaze. Then you stand up again. Trouble arrived with the efficiency of a machine. Men carrying heavy nets and reinforced metal cages moved through the alleys, their movements practiced and entirely indifferent to the lives they were disrupting. The local strays scattered in a frantic blur of fur and terror. Ash froze. The sight of the cages sent memories crashing back into his mind. The car door, the empty road, the feeling of being discarded. His muscles locked as the old fear clawed its way upward through his throat. Jonah stepped forward, his own legs unsteady but his heart determined. He placed himself directly between Ash and the encroaching threat. No, Jonah whispered, his voice cracking but firm. This is where you stand. The fear in Ash's chest roared like a physical beast. Time began to stretch thin. The power surged within him, wild, jagged, and potentially overwhelming. He could feel how easy it would be to end this threat with a single violent burst. The darkness in his mind whispered invitations to tear and destroy. But Ash breathed. He remembered the rhythm of Jonah's lungs. He rose upright, standing tall on two legs, steady despite the tremors in his thighs. His shadow lengthened unnaturally, casting a dark, imposing shape across the pavement that chilled the air. The men with the nets hesitated, a wave of primal unease rippling through them. They saw something ancient in the dog's eyes, something they didn't understand. Ash did not attack. He simply stood his ground. The men backed away, muttering excuses, their eyes refusing to meet his. Word of the guardian under the bridge began to spread through the city like a quiet, persistent rumor. People spoke of a dog who didn't run, a golden figure who stood where others fled. When a fire broke out in a tenement building near the bridge, Ash moved before he had time to be afraid. The smoke thickened the air into a black soup, and heat rolled off the brickwork in violent, shimmering waves. Ash's enhanced senses cut through the chaos, guiding him unerringly through the blinding haze. He found those trapped inside, his body enduring temperatures that should have scorched his lungs and broken his spirit. He carried the smallest ones out one by one, his grip firm but gentle. People on the sidewalk stared in a stunned, reverent silence. They saw a golden blur emerging from the flames, standing upright like a man, carrying a life to safety before dropping back to all fours to vanish into the shadows. They filmed him with their phones. They whispered prayers. But Ash did not stay for the applause or the cameras. He returned to the darkness of the bridge, where Jonah watched from a distance, a quiet pride shining through his worn, tired eyes. You're ready now, Jonah said, his voice thick with emotion. Ash stood taller than he ever had before, supported not just by his muscles, but by the weight of a new belief. He no longer felt the need to hide what he was from the world. He simply chose exactly where and when to use it. Ash never became a celebrity. He didn't want the bright lights or the shallow praise of a world that had once thrown him away like trash. He remained in the forgotten places, the overcrowded shelters, the cold alleys, and the damp spaces beneath the bridges. He stayed where rejection lived and where hope had worn thin. When danger came to those who had no one else to defend them, Ash stood. When fear arrived to claim another soul, Ash breathed and held the line. He became the silent partner to the invisible people of the city, a myth wrapped in golden fur and a white cloth vest. Jonah eventually found the help he needed, a second chance at a life above the concrete, but he never left Ash behind. They remained a team, two souls who had found their worth in the wreckage of their pasts. Ash remained a guardian, quiet and unseen by the majority of the sprinting world. And for him, that was more than enough. He didn't need a collar to know who he belonged to anymore. He belonged to the duty he had chosen for himself. The dog they had abandoned on a nameless highway had transformed into something the world could never truly categorize. He was the hero who stayed when everyone else had walked away. He was the proof that being discarded is not the same as being finished. In the silence of the night, the warmth in his chest finally felt like home. If you believe that even the broken can find a noble purpose, hit that like button and subscribe to join our journey. We're building a community of protectors, and we want you with us. Drop a comment below with one word that describes what strength means to you. Let's show the world that, like Ash, we stand where others run.